So I am thrilled to have Ariella Kimmel on Leverage this week. She is the executive director of ABC Toronto. I had the fortunate event of attending your launch event, I guess, down on College Street. I was made aware of it by our mutual friend Brad Bradford, and also our mutual love for Toronto, and just wanted to see more positive stuff being done in our city. And so I'm thrilled that you were able to come on, because as soon as I went to it, I just want you to know, I went on it and I was like, who's Ariella Kimmel? I need to know who she is. I need to know what she's doing. I am so up for this. I want to know. I just love, like, not to go off topic before I even let you get introduced to introduce yourself, but like I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, I don't know if it's because I'm like getting older, or like I feel like stuff's going south, but like I think it's time for more people to stop complaining and more people to do, like, just do. This year was the first time I ever canvassed for a political party. I've never ever taken the time to canvass ever, which by the way was like so beyond disorganized. I was so appalled, but we talked about that also. But anyway, on that note, I just have so much respect for you, Ariella, for like noticing what's going on, getting involved, and just creating this amazing organization. So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So tell our audience, and there are a lot of people who I know, we have mutual friends, but of the people that watch my show and follow me, please tell us who you are, where you came from, your background.
Sure. So as I said, my name is Ariella Kimmel. I am the executive director of A Better City Toronto, or ABC Toronto. I'm actually not originally from Toronto. I'm originally from Ottawa. I grew up there, went to university there, and eventually moved to Toronto in 2015, and then to Alberta in 2019, and then back to Toronto. So I've kind of just lived around the country, and I love Canada. I love this country. I love, the direction I think we can go in and what we can be. And my entire career has kind of been dedicated to that in many different ways.
So did you take like poli sci in university? Like, have you always kind of been on that road of like political greatness?
I wouldn't call me political greatness, but yeah, like not really. It's funny because growing up, like I never would have thought this as my career path, and even in university, like my first or second year of university, I really got involved in politics because at Carleton, I got brought into this group that was trying to change the student council from the group that was there at the time, and they were very anti-Israel and very problematic for the Jewish community on campus. So I like started to help these guys try and win elections, and that kind of got me into it. And then I ended up actually interning. My first job on the Parliament Hill was with the Canadian. It was the Canadian Committee for Combating Anti-Semitism. So at that time, Canada was like planning, and then we hosted the International Conference on Combating Anti-Semitism, which is actually like the start of the IRA definition that everyone uses today. And so I was in
Not everyone.
yeah, sorry. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance as the definition of anti-Semitism that we like have tried across the country and around the world to get people to adopt. So the original part of it was the Ottawa Protocol, which was developed for this conference. But so I was a student at Carleton, and it was the first year of the Developing Future Leaders program at Carleton, which was run through the Jewish Studies Department, which was about like mentorship and building community volunteers and activists. And so I was the first year I was a mentor, and I had a mentee that I worked with, and then I needed to volunteer somewhere. So that's how I ended up here. It was actually Erwin Kotler's office. So I was working through them. And then
Incredible.
when I had this, I met Jason Kenney, and I ended up starting working for him. And I still hadn't finished university. So that's kind of how I got into politics. It was never on my radar. And my parents aren't political, or weren't. I mean, now they are, but yeah.
Oh, wow. That's an incredible background. So I feel like you and I could probably do a whole politics episode, just between maybe even like a long series of them. But you know what I loved about ABC Toronto, and I'd love you to like kind of get into like what that like light bulb moment was in your life where you said like this needs to happen. I think it's really interesting for people to understand the other side of ABC Toronto, which is Progress Toronto, that I didn't like as someone who lives, breathes, and works within the Toronto infrastructure, I didn't know even existed. But it makes so much sense when you think about it. But what I loved about your launch event was I've had like, first of all, your guests were amazing. Brad Bradford's always a pleasure to have on. I actually called Eric Lombardi and had him on my podcast. He's doing some amazing things about kind of rethinking housing, more neighborhoods. We had a great debate on whether it would be okay if I had a great coffee shop next to my house or not.
I have one across the street from me, and it's the best thing ever.
Right. I mean, I live in a park, but I was like, and then I was like, wait a second, like I just got back from Europe and that totally happened. So, right. So I love the outward thinking, and there was the gentleman, I'm sorry, I forget his name, who was very involved in Scarborough.
Sean Allen.
Sean Allen was amazing, and it really made you think about, you know, like, so why don't people live in Scarborough, right? Like you would think like, and then he was like, there's no transit, like no one can get around, like you can't get in and out of Scarborough, right? So these basic fundamental things to make our city more livable, more inhabitable, more affordable. And I felt like you approached it in so many different segments, from political to urban planning to just like kind of out of the box thinking. So having said all that, what was that day? Like walk us through that day where you're like, I need to start this organization.
So I actually didn't start it. The board started it, which are, you know, three
I was just about
people.
to give you credit.
No, I don't take credit where I don't have it. So it was the three of them who started it. And they were, you know, these were three people who are from different political backgrounds, and one who's like not from any partisan background. And they just came together because they wanted to literally build a better city. So one of them, I mean, knew two of the board members before this, but one of them has become a very good friend of mine over the last year and a half. And so I reached out to her and I was like, what can I do? How can I get involved? And that's kind of, it went from there, that they needed someone who can like day to day run it and be out there and engaging, and like spend the days at City Hall watching the painful debates on their motions. So that's how I ended up being brought in.
Okay, fantastic. So for everybody that's never heard of ABC Toronto, maybe you can just give everybody like an elevator pitch about what you guys are all about.
Sure. So we are about bringing together people to talk about the issues facing our city, not from an ideological perspective, but from what will actually make the city function well and work well, and what makes the most sense. So, you know, as I said, everyone on the board comes from a very different backgrounds, and I think that's so important. We are not here to push an ideology. We really are here to like bring people together and have conversations and share like what we think and how we want to see the city move. You know, so the launch event was a great moment for that, because it was not about politics. It was really about the things in this city that are impacting everyone's day-to-day life and what's wrong with them. And I want us to be a place for debate and conversation, and for people to come with their different views, which like nobody does anymore. There's no such thing as like debate and conversation.
No, gaslighting and just shutting down, and no one's allowed to listen to each other anymore. It's so
Yeah.
sad.
Well, so I was on a panel at the Democracy X conference at TMU, not, and it was about the future of cities, and it was a great conversation. I think, you know, it was a lot of fun. And afterwards, this girl came up to me and she's like, wow, you're not what I thought you were going to be. And I was like, what did you think I was going to be? She's like, I've heard you're like the Trump of the North. And I was like, yeah,
You're top of
yeah.
the
So I was like, she's like, you're very nuanced. And I was like, I am very nuanced, and I'm not hyper partisan anymore. I'm hyper like, I'm hyper out there, I guess, on issues I care about, and I'm a loud voice. But if something's wrong, I'll say it's wrong, and if something's right, I'll say it's right. Right? You give credit where credit's due, but like you also need people to take responsibility for what's wrong.
One of the things that first of all, I will laugh for days that someone thought you were Trump of the North. I mean, I have to tell you, like, all you have to do is spend like 5 minutes with Eric, and you would know that he would not be on a panel with someone who is Trump of the North. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. But to me, the first of all, you guys had it like there was a massive snowstorm, okay? And I think it took us like we drove like 20 kilometers, like a mile, an hour home. It was that bad. And you guys had standing room only. And to me, what really stood out about that event and why I was like, I need to know more about this. I need to know who Ariella is. I need to get involved. What can I do? Is this basic love for the city of Toronto that we all knew, that we no longer recognize. And again, like, not to get on that ideological bandwagon, this isn't what it is. It's just about safety. It's about, being able to lock your doors at night and know that someone's not going to bash through the front door with a gun to take your car. That, we have someone leading our city that we feel represents us, and keeping Toronto a place where you would want to raise your family. So whether it's the neighborhoods, it's transit, which is on a provincial level, but like, so my question to you and your like executive team is like, what keeps you guys up at night? Like, if you were like, if I could change one thing in Toronto, if ABC Toronto could execute, this, I feel like it would make a huge difference.
So I mean, we have kind of four focus areas. I know you asked for one, but we do have four focus areas that I think
Nope.
all feed about off each other. So, public safety is one of them. Affordability, obviously, mobility, which is to us from everything from the congestion crisis and what that impact on the city to transit issues. So it all and everything kind of in between. How can people get around the city? And then that all ties into the economy, right? Toronto is supposed to be and is the economic center of Canada. And it has to thrive in order to be that. It has to be a place that people want to come and live. And they're not going to want to live here if they think that it's not safe for their children to take the bus to school, if they can't afford a house in a nice neighborhood that they want to raise their families in, if it's not, if they can't get around the city and they realize that it doesn't make it sense to move here or move their business here. And so I think that it all comes down to what impact does our current issues have on our ability to build a future. Because I'm late 30s, and I live here in a good neighborhood. I can't afford a house. And most of my friends, live in the suburbs if they have kids, and a family, and they can't get around. So it's just a constant circle of here's what is the issue is and no solutions.
And do you feel like that's something that can be done on a city level? Like that again, being a better city, Toronto, that could be like, what do you feel leadership could do, for example, that would make a difference, like a real difference?
So I think we're just stuck in this cycle of virtue signaling. So I'm going to use the Trump tariff stuff as an example where like we could do real things, but we've decided that we'll virtue signal instead. So we come, the mayor comes out and talks about how we need to buy local, and that Canada is, Toronto will no longer procure anything from the US, and like waving the Canadian flag, elbows up kind of, talk. And then they put out these like signs in different neighborhoods that like have one, it says like I heart local, or like these massive
Yes.
signs. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, okay, I do love local, but like that doesn't make me buy local. But it was all like performative and photo ops rather than anything real. And there's like just these prime examples of little things the city could do to make it easier to like own and operate a business, right? Like all these different regulations and bylaws that basically like handcuff people. Like I have my hairdresser is like in her studio now, but when she first went to open, the area that they were in, they literally had the salon set up and ready to bring in clients, and the city showed up and were like, no, you can't open. This isn't zoned for a business, right? Like it's this kind of stuff, and you go to City Hall and people are work from home. There's no productivity. There's nobody there to answer the
no
calls.
accountability.
And
No
it's,
accountability.
yeah, and it's unhelpful. So if you're trying to build a business in the city or grow your business, or, it's going to like the slowdowns in the bureaucracy do nothing but hurt local businesses.
I think the last stat I had was something like 60% of all the parks and rec workers are not in the parks and the recreation centers. They're at home. Like, I mean, I would say, as taking kind of back into affordability and housing and living in this city, I've first of all, Toronto's the only city that has a double land transfer tax. So to me, listening to any leader at the city level telling me that they are going to make housing affordable for people in Toronto, and the next thing out of their mouth isn't, I will take the land transfer tax off at the city level, I stop listening. Because then it is 100% performative. They are just saying it on a soapbox to get a news headline. Otherwise, they're not really serious. Because that would, if tomorrow Olivia Chow were to come out and say, I am scrapping the land transfer tax for Toronto, I would tell you people would move. That is a huge amount of money. It's something like $16,000 per so you're about $32,000 per $1 million. And quite honestly, so imagine that you've now scraped together the ability to buy something for $1 million. Unbelievable. Very few people can say they can do this. And then you're going to slap a $32,000 tax on them. And then you want to go on and tell me that you're going to help build better, and you're going to take red tape against, all you're doing is making the developers happy. You're not actually helping that day-to-day homeowner. It's really, then they increase the land taxes, my property taxes, my client's property taxes, for what? For people to do less at work at City Hall? It is shocking. Shocking. And this is why I'm like, ABC Toronto, how can I help? I'm available.
They don't. That's the thing about, they rate the consistent raising of taxes does not come with like better services and better programs and, innovative ways to solve issues.
More
And
waste.
yeah, it's a constant for me that I'm like, I'll sit at City Hall in the council meeting, and I'm actually just like flabbergasted at the conversation that I'm hearing, because I'm like, nothing about this is touching the actual issue or what's happening.
Like
Like
a word
even,
salad. Big word
yeah,
salad. Yeah.
like even with the Trump tariff stuff, when the plan came, and I was cringing when they were like, well, city workers can no longer take Ubers and be reimbursed.
Why?
Like,
First of all, why
who?
are city workers taking Ubers to begin with?
I mean, if yeah, like, okay, I'll give it to like if city councilors are going, yeah, if city councilors are going to events or whatever, I'll give it to people that there's are reasons, but like who is driving the Uber? Canadians. Who's working in the Uber office? Canadians. Like, they have a massive office here and a massive infrastructure, and it's like, okay, so now you're going to take jobs away from like all different levels of people. And just to virtue signal that the 10 Uber rides taken a year at City Hall aren't like can't be allowed anymore. It's
Oh, don't even.
so ridiculous.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. I don't like performative. I don't like performative in any way, shape, or form. It makes me like it actually just enrages me because it's like, okay, what are you going to do? Everyone loves words, but nobody likes to do anything that's actionable. And that's where I'm frustrated, and that's kind of why I got involved in this because I look at this city and it's not thriving the way it could. And, that doesn't, saying that things need to change doesn't make you anything political, politically different or bad or whatever. It's saying that the status quo doesn't work anymore. If cities want to function and move forward, there has to be changes. Everyone likes to just do the same thing over and over. And it's like, what's the definition of insanity? Repeating the same thing that doesn't work. And it's just the basics we can't even get right. Like the snow, when there was that massive snowstorm and there was snow all over the side, like the sidewalks, you couldn't walk on them. They were like,
For weeks.
they weren't for weeks. They weren't plowed. The roads were terrible.
Come after me. I don't care. The bike lanes, we live in Canada. I'm sorry, the bike lanes got priority over the sidewalks and the streets.
Yep. And people trying to push their kids' strollers to daycare in my area, like watching them was like so sad. And then the mayor goes out and does a video where she's trying to blame the contracts that the city has with external operators. And in the meantime,
The committee.
like she's standing in front of the sidewalks that the city of Toronto are responsible for, talking about how they're not being plowed. And the whole thing was like they saw it as an opportunity because they want to bring these jobs back into City Hall so that unionized workers have them and they're supporting the unions. But it's those workers that weren't plowing this part of the city that they needed. And partially because from what I understand, like at least half, if not a little less or a little more of the snowplow fleet were broken and they had to borrow from the private contractors. So I just this is a basic service that you can't get right.
Basic.
Like
Yeah,
basic.
basic. Yep. It's really shocking. It's really, and then the best response is, let's start a committee. We're going to start a committee so that we can we can just delay any response and any moving forward of fixing anything while we spend all this money. I mean, the whole coyote issue. I was telling someone about this. I was listening to Jerry Agar on 1010. I got stuck in a van going to pick my daughter up to Kingston. There was I had to listen to the radio for the first time in 20 years. And he went off the deep end. He was so angry because if I'm getting this wrong, they created a committee to talk about the coyotes that were killing the dogs. and then the city's response and press release was written as if they were coming from the coyotes. Did I get that right?
So
Someone and I'm like, am I making this up? Because that sounds so ludicrous.
So there was a motion for like a coyote action plan, which then went to like a committee that they created. And then that's it. They were putting signs up around Liberty Village that said like, I'm your coyote neighbor, meet me. And people are like, I don't want to meet you. My dog was killed. And it's not like and it's crazy. So I do listen to either like Greg Brady or John Moore in the mornings when I'm walking my dog. And, I remember that somebody called in and was like, why don't people just go walk their dogs somewhere else? And I was like, so you want people to get up in the mornings, especially from Liberty Village, you can't get around anywhere. But so I should get up and leave my neighborhood at 7 a.m. when I need to walk my dog on the streetcar to take her somewhere else and then come back here when we have a perfectly good walking path in my neighborhood that we love to go on and she's very happy on. I was like, that doesn't make sense for what? And then in the end, they were, they were trying to make everyone who said, call them, like you just have to do it, seem like they were evil. And in the end, they had to call two of them because they said there was like the one that they suspected was the most vicious and then his partner. So they had to kill them both.
Which is
And I
horrible.
was like,
I'm an animal lover, but I'm sorry. If my dog bites someone and actually do you know that the city would put my dog down without even thinking about it? But now the coyotes have different rights. So the coyote's allowed to attack, but my dog's not allowed to attack.
yeah, I've decided the city council hates dogs. Like I have just this like, so there's that. So I always take my dog to a local park. There's a bunch of us that do. It's not a fenced in dog park. We are there
God
every
forbid.
morning.
Don't take
Oh yeah, no, bylaw was showing up every morning. And there was like 8 of them showing up and like surrounding us, like they were coming from different angles. And every morning, and like we were just like we would throw our dogs on leash and walk away. And
Maybe
it doesn't
yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
it doesn't make sense. It was literally like a park where nobody else is. And especially in the dead of winter, the bylaw doesn't show up in the dead of winter, obviously, but like, because they don't want to go outside. But like, even like there's nobody there. So why can't the city be a little bit creative and look at these parks and be like, okay, like in New York, you could go to Central Park in the mornings, I think from like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. with your dogs off leash. Why can't we do things like that? We could take our dogs just for the mornings when they're not being used and when there's a baseball game or there's kids or whatever, that is fine. But I take my dog there purposely because the dog parks, the fenced-in ones, are usually dirty, they're stinky, and nobody pays attention to their dogs. And so that's how dogs get hurt. And the other one is, if Brad listens to this, he's going to laugh so hard at me for this, but sound can't.
No, we're going to tag him in it.
So there's atop the Leslie Barnes here in the East End, there are sound cannons that go off multiple times every hour to scare away seagulls from the green roof on top of the building. I just want to preface this by saying this is also next to Tommy Thompson Park, where I can't take my dog because it's a safe for the wildlife, which is totally fine. I'm fine with that. But you're blowing out cannons that are very loud, and now they are terrorizing the dogs here. Like they're traumatizing them. Like I cannot take my dog to the further east. Like if I start to walk that direction, she shakes and she's like panicked, and it is like terrifying for her. And I went on Twitter and I have multiple videos of her like absolutely like petrified, and I tagged all the city councilors who are on the TTC committee because it's the TTC board because it's a TTC building. And I was like, why are these necessary? Research also shows they don't work. And all you're doing is traumatizing the dogs in this neighborhood. Not one of them has answered, except one of them did. Paul Ainsley responded, what sound cannons? When I know for a fact that to every office in City Hall, the TTC sent a description, or any affected office, the sent a description of what the sound cannons are, which means sorry, that he on the TTC board should have known about this. So, yeah.
No, not important. I mean, and this is where circling back and putting a bow on, the fact that we have a city that is creating committees around coyotes and not actioning and making the city safer from anywhere from, for example, coyotes at Tommy Thompson to having to redirect ambulances in downtown Toronto for massive demonstrations calling for the death of certain people, to people breaking into homes with guns. And we can, we've got this is the level of disaster we've got going on, and then we're down here where we can't even get the snow right. So I want to talk a little bit before we end this about Progress Toronto. So I was unaware that this was a group. I feel like maybe just like off my radar because I would not be part of or be exposed to. But do you feel like the directors were creating ABC Toronto, or the founders created it in a response to Progress Toronto, or they just felt there needed to be another group, or what was it? Because again, at the mayoral level, the city level, it is a bipartisan. You're not a conservative, you're not a liberal, you're not anything, right? You're just the mayor.
You're supposed to be just the mayor, but
Well,
Progress
that's
Toronto
really
operates like a political party.
yes.
ABC Toronto wasn't a response to Progress Toronto. ABC Toronto is more a like these conversations aren't happening. How do we make them happen? And like you said, you came to the event in a massive snowstorm. There was over 200 people. There was supposed to be over 400 people. They had registered. If they had all shown up, we would have been screwed.
Yeah. We were.
But it was packed. Like we would have had people on the upstairs, and that to me just showed that people were actually are just hungry for conversation and for understanding what's happening. And we are doing another event next week in Scarborough, talking about the future of this city for the next generation. Like, what city are we building for the next generations to be able to like live here and raise their families here and build businesses here. So I don't like to say that we're a response to them. I think, we're different in that they are very political, very partisan, and they operate in it kind of as this, like, as a political party in the municipal space, even though political parties aren't allowed. And I frankly sit there being like, okay, there are cities where political parties became allowed. And so if the city wants, obviously I know it comes from the province, but like if the city wants to operate this way, then like make the change. But having somebody operating on the side in this way makes it a bit questionable to me.
So is Progress Toronto, so can you give us again like a really quick like elevator pitch, like who is Progress Toronto, or what do they want people to believe they are?
So Progress Toronto is aligned with the NDP, and they do operate like a political party, but they go door knocking, they run campaigns, they pick specific candidates that they want to see win, and they drive their volunteers to help them. So in the by-election where Rachel Turnoff-Lynn won, running against Anthony Furey, they mobilized as much as possible to beat Anthony, right? So they will mobilize their people. So right now, if you're paying attention to them, they're mass mobilizing against the bubble zone legislation, which will be debated tomorrow. It's like it's all over everywhere because they are very actively pushing a campaign against it. So that's how they operate.
Yeah, because we should all be terrorized in our own city.
Well, this is the thing about like I always want to say like, with the bubble zones. I'm just watching this. Look, I do not necessarily think this is the perfect answer. I think that it is an action that should be taken at this time because there is nothing else being done, and at this point, it is terrifying for the Jewish community, and I'm one, are terrorized by what is happening. And we should feel safe in our own homes.
And we don't.
We don't. And I remember like a year ago, if not a bit more, my friend called me and his daughter was at the daycare in Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center, and they were protesting in front, and they were so aggressive and loud that that he and a lot of parents decided to go and pick up their kid and take them home in the middle of the day. And when they were leaving, his daughter said to him, "Daddy, do they hate us because we're Jews?" The fact that a child had to ask that is something that like I can't, like, she's had to be like 4 or 5. And like, how do they have that mentality? And I really just like every kind of conversation I'm having about the bubble zone legislation, I want to just say to everyone, like, stop for a second and imagine if the catalyst for this was anything else except for the Jewish community and the Israel-Palestine conflict.
Black, any minority. By the way, people should know the bubble zone is not just for synagogues. The bubble zone is for churches, it's for schools, it's for mosques, it's a bipartisan bubble zone across the board. This is not just for the Jewish community. It happens to be needed for the Jewish community right now.
Yes, it would protect the 519 in, on Church Street from massive protests, and they already exist for abortion clinics, which is the right thing to do. Vulnerable people going to have abortion should not be traumatized by protesters yelling to them about being baby killers and whatever else. That is the right thing to do. So why do Jews or any other minority have to go to their house of worship, their community center, their schools, their daycares, and be yelled at by obscenities in front of their children and people essentially chanting for their death? And it's nobody else. If it was any other community, I would put good money on the fact that Progress Toronto would not be investing what I imagine is thousands of dollars in running a campaign against this. And the proposed legislation is just a joke. Like it is the attempt to say we did this at the very bare minimum while creating red tape and bureaucracy for vulnerable institutions and communities, and essentially not even protecting them. They're saying 20 meters. Nobody's saying you can't protest. Like, stop. Say you can protest. Look at what happens downtown every weekend. No one's stopping you from doing that. Not even an ambulance going through stops that. And so don't tell me that this is taking away your freedom of expression. Like, you have it. You have it beyond what you should have. You are allowed to walk on the streets of Toronto and praise Hamas and praise the killing of babies, and to praise, what happened on October 7th and whatever else they spew is consistently just happening. Set off smoke bombs in front of restaurants because they're Israeli. You guys have the freedom to do all of that. We are just asking is maybe don't scream death to the Jews in front of a synagogue. That was also happened at one that was essentially built by Holocaust survivors when they came to this country. So just take a second and imagine any other minority, this wouldn't be the same situation.
Yeah, and I think what people have to realize is that it starts there, but at the end of the day, and this is being consistently brought up by like liberals like Warren Kinsella and you name it, is they're not flying Canadian flags. Like, let's just remember about it. So protesting is one thing, but there is a lot of very anti-Western rhetoric as well, which again I think leads to this feeling of, where is Toronto going? But that is also, this could be a whole other episode. So do you think that Progress Toronto is getting a seat at the table with, they are?
Yeah, I think that they're like, I mean, they were behind Olivia when we had when the campaign happened. They were actively out there for her. They are tied to the NDP, which we know she's comes from. And so I do believe, and, I have to say, I think in the fall, the bubble zone legislation had come from James Pasternak and Brad Bradford put it forward. And I went to watch it, and I watched as, I knew the campaign from Progress Toronto was very active, sending letters, telling counselors to say no. And then I watched as the mayor's office staff were negotiating away things with counselors to get them to vote against it. And it worked for some of them. They were like, oh, well, we'll give you this, we'll take away this, or we'll give you this in your ward if you vote against it. And they use a lot of political capital to get that to go down. And so it's very clear to me how tied it is, right? The mayor's office didn't want it. Progress Toronto is out there pushing against it.
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like my next question, just to make me feel better, is when is the election next year?
In the fall of 2026.
So it will be October, I think, the vote is around October. And when can candidates announce their...
They can announce any time. They can announce their intention to run at any time. So we'll see. But hopefully, I think, we have time now that things need to get better. And I keep being what is the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? With Coyotes, I was are we just waiting for a child to be murdered? With the protests happening downtown, how is a 8-year-old child in an ambulance not the straw that breaks the camel's back? And with all due respect to Brad Brady, because I very much like him a lot, today on the radio, they were talking about it, and I was texting to say to him, like, I disagree with you on this and I agree with you on this. And the one thing, he kept saying, like, I bet you these protesters would move out of the way. They would, like, they'd be embarrassed that, like, that the cops should have just told them. And the cops were very much in the wrong in this whole situation. And they tried to blame the EMS, but it was the cops who made that decision because they didn't want to deal with the protesters. But those protesters would not necessarily have stopped. And we've seen it before with them. And it is not like, I would not say that, like, this again, this is a group of people who are fighting tooth and nail for the right to stand in front of daycares and yell obscenities at Jewish children. They are not moving out of the way for an ambulance as they're marching down Yonge Street, and that's just,
No,
I
and
think,
the police are not empowered to do anything about it as well. I know I've spoken to someone I know whose father's an ex-cop, and he said it's just not worth it. You can get canceled. People find out where your family is, where, your children's school, they get harassed. They're just not willing to put their life on the line and lose their pension, whatever, because they're just not empowered. I mean, and it's a failure on so many levels. And the mayor's office is not empowering them and not telling, because I was on a great call with Warren Kinsella about 6 months ago, and he said there are Canadian laws that make everything that's going on right now illegal, and it's not happening. But then you also have, again, like the federal catch and release, where you've got these people breaking into your homes and they've got 18-year-olds because they're going to get thrown, like they'll be out of, of jail within the next 12 hours. So it's disconcerting for sure, but I think that the city of Toronto has always been a really, really great place to live. It still is. It still has so much potential. I see families building their lives here, looking for, new homes, enjoying parks and going out and still, the dream of home ownership is still very much alive. And I hope that there is better days ahead for the leadership in Toronto. However way you feel about Olivia Chow or whatever political party, I truly believe that there is an element across the board of people wanting to, like you said, have a voice. So before I let you go, I will make sure that we put the link to the event to next week in the show notes. I definitely want to find out when it is so I can come. And I thank you so much. I feel like you and I could sit and talk about this for...
I'm like sitting there being like, I have so much to say about the lack of leadership in this city. And, Warren is right. There are a ton of laws that are in place, including the glorification of terror, that the Liberals did make changes to. But when you see people being arrested at this point, people like me who are paying attention can remember the last time they were arrested. So this weekend, someone was arrested who was arrested at the Walk with Israel last year. So what's it going to be like this year? And I will just, my last thing too is it is a lack of leadership, and it's not just municipally. And it's the police are essentially being told don't do anything, and they don't. And as you said, they don't want to. But I always go back to like the convoy, right? What happened in the convoy when why did the police go in, and why were they so secure going in? Because the prime minister, the premier, and the mayor were up every day talking about how bad it was and taking a stand against it. And they were obsessed with it. And not one of them has gotten up and said, not even about this ambulance. Not one of them has made a statement about an ambulance with a child and it being stopped and moved around. So it is a lack of leadership, and it's so disappointing. And this is not ideological at this point. This is just who wants to come here? It's human decency, and it's looking at the city and like, who wants to come to the city when that's what they're seeing?
It's very true. It really is true. And the question is, where does it stop? I don't know. We'll see. This weekend is the Walk for Israel. It'll be very interesting on Sunday. I will say the cops did a really good job last year. And I know Shomrim will be out there as well. So I wish everybody a really safe walk. And
I'll be there with a group of allies of non-Jews who want to be there to stand with the Jewish community. So I just like mentioning that because I think people want to feel supported, and that we're not alone.
Community comes out in droves. Like there's so many. The Iranian community comes out. It's beautiful. And I think that again goes back to the idea that we as human beings want a city where everyone feels safe, that feels like a great place to live and raise our family. And let's end it on that and hope that, we have, again, better days to come. And good luck on the event next week. And I'm going to look into it. Hopefully I can be there.
I'll send you the link after this.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel.